Baseball ASMR. In today's video, I thought I would explain the different pitch types in baseball and their differences in how they move and their speeds and why they move and what their purpose is, just to sort of give you an intro to pitching. Hopefully it'll be useful when you watch a baseball game, but it's not as hard anymore because most broadcasts show the pitch type on the screen now, as you can see here with Walker Buehler from last year's NLCS. So yeah, let's dive right in. Before we get to specific pitches, I just want to define a couple terms that I'll be using that will be helpful for you to know. There are three main pitch types, at least to me. There's fastballs and off-speed pitches, and then a smaller subdivision of off-speed is breaking balls. So, first of all, any pitch that is not a fastball can be considered to be off-speed since it travels slower than a fastball. The main feature of an off-speed pitch is to mess up the batter's timing at the plate, because hitting is all about timing. You get ready for the pitch, you see it come, you time your swing, you swing at the right moment in the right place. So batting is all timing and pitching is about disrupting timing. So off-speed pitches mess up the batter's timing. And then a smaller subcategory of off-speed pitches are breaking balls, which are off-speed pitches designed to have movement, either down or to the side or both. So you can think of off-speed pitches and breaking balls sort of like squares and rectangles. If you remember your geometry, all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. Because squares have the same length sides, but rectangles don't have to. So in pitching, breaking balls, all breaking balls are off-speed pitches, but not all off-speed pitches are breaking balls. Next, we have spin and spin rate. In baseball, spin refers to the axis that the ball rotates around. Again, from geometry, if you remember, in three-dimensional space, regular, just plain old 3D space that we live in, there are three axes. There's X, Y, and Z, and depending on how the pitcher grips the ball and what kind of pitch he's throwing, the axis of spin will be a combination of one or multiple of these axes. Straight backspin along the x-axis is what a regular old four-seam fastball is thrown with. It basically means the baseball spins parallel to home plate and the pitcher. And so the axis would be a line through the baseball parallel to the pitcher and home plate. And it would spin backwards. So that's spin. It's just which way is the ball spinning, which is a big deal for how the pitch moves and then how the batter can see the pitch, how they can pick it up and determine what the pitch is in time to swing. And then spin rate is the measurement of how much the ball spins, measured in RPMs or rotations per minute. So a higher spin rate means the ball spins more and thus will break or move more or break or move later. Which is better for the pitcher because it's less time for the batter to react. Next, we have velo, aka velocity, which is very simply the speed of a pitch. In baseball, it simply just means speed in miles per hour. It's actually both for pitching and hitting. There's a radar gun for pitches that measures how fast the pitch goes. Actually, that's the old way. The new way is with fast speed, high-speed cameras. And I believe they use the same for bat speed and for exit velocity, which is how hard a batter hits a ball when they make contact. But either way, it's measured in miles per hour. And just as a piece of fun trivia, the fastest clocked fastball ever thrown was 105.8 miles per hour, thrown by Aroldis Chapman for the Cincinnati Reds in 2010, before he went to the Cubs and Yankees and the Royals and some other teams. Next, we have arm side versus glove side. It's basically a way to talk about how pitches move regardless of the handedness of the pitcher. So if a right-hander throws a slider, it would break down into the left. And if a left-hander throws a slider, it would break down into the right. So A way of saying that isn't tied to the pitcher's handedness, it would be to say that a slider has glove side run, because it goes to the pitcher's glove side. So like a right-hander obviously throws the ball with his right hand and holds his glove in his left, and vice versa for a left-hander. And so a slider will always break toward the glove side. And then arm side run would be the opposite, where it goes towards the pitcher's arm side. So pitches like a sinker or a two-seam fastball have arm side run. They run to the arm side. Next, we have supination versus pronation. Now, this is a little technical, but basically it refers to which way a pitcher rotates his wrist and hand when he throws a pitch. The terms come from being prone, which is facing down, and supine, facing up. So if you rotate your wrist outwards when you throw a pitch, that's called supination, because your wrist and hand end the motion by facing upwards. And if you rotate your wrist inwards, that's pronation, since your hand ends with your hand facing down. This is important when discussing certain pitches and their movement, but it's very technical. But just in case it comes up, I think it will. Next, we have command versus control. Both of these have to do with a pitcher's ability to throw pitches, but command is more like pinpoint accuracy, and control is a little more general and is just about throwing strikes. So if you start with control, it basically just means that a pitcher is able to throw strikes over and over, so that even if the batter doesn't swing, it would still be a strike. This especially applies to a pitcher's secondary pitches. Most pitchers throw a fastball as their primary pitch, and then everything else is considered secondary pitches. So if you're able to throw all of these for strikes, you're going to have more success. You'll get ahead into good pitchers counts like 0-1, 0-2, 1-2. And you can tell if a pitcher does not have control, if they're walking a lot of batters or throwing wild pitches, if they're missing the zone a lot or getting behind with counts like 2-0, 3-0, 3-1. And then command is more precise than controls and means that a pitcher is able to deliver a pitch exactly where they want to within the strike zone, especially on the edges or corners. This is important because most hitters have what's called a hole or multiple holes in their swing, and this just means that it's an area of the strike zone where they have trouble hitting the ball. So if a pitcher is able to command their pitches, they will probably throw more pitches to those areas where the batter is not known to hit them to get them out more easily. This can also be referred to as like painting the corners, aka he's able to put the ball right on the corners or the edges of the strike zone, which can fool the hitter into thinking it's going to be a ball, but it's actually still a strike. And lastly, we have arm slot. This is basically how high the pitcher's arm is when he releases the pitch. Overhead is considered to be less than 40 degrees from straight over his head. And then 3/4 is between 50 and 60 degrees, and sidearm is anything over 70. And then sometimes you can have like a submariner, which is they throw from like very low where their knuckles almost scrape the dirt of the mound, but they're very rare, especially these days. Okay, let's dive right into the types of pitches, and we'll start with fastballs. The typical, normal, everyday fastball is a 4-seam fastball. This is what basically every pitcher throws, or at least starts throwing. It's the purpose of a 4-seam fastball is to go fast and straight, mostly. If you throw from a lower arm slot, a 4-seamer can run more like a 2-seamer or a sinker where it moves to the side or down, but they're still thrown with the 4-seam grip, which is your index and middle fingers perpendicular to the seams. Those are the red bits of the baseball, if you're unfamiliar, so that when you throw it, all the 4 seams of the horseshoe cross the plane of spin. So basically, there'll be So the seams will all be rotating parallel to the pitcher and the plate, and it's basically just supposed to go fast and hard and straight. So like what makes a fastball hard to hit is how fast it goes. It's velo. So the higher the velo, the harder it is to hit. Next, you have a two-seam or a running fastball. These are usually a little bit slower than a four-seam because it has some movement. So more of the pitcher's effort is put into moving the ball than just throwing it as hard as they can. Two-seamers have arm side run, which is why they're called running fastballs. And the grip is the same as a four-seam, but with the fingers parallel to the seams instead of perpendicular, so that only two seams cross the plane of spin, which is where it gets its name from. And the run is typically side to side. It could have a little bit up or down, mostly down, but it's basically side to side because if you add more downward motion, it becomes a sinker. And a sinker, it's similar to a two-seamer in that it moves a little slower than a four-seamer with arm side horizontal run, but a sinker also moves downward as it approaches the plate. Some people, especially broadcasters, consider two-seamers and sinkers the same, but I like to differentiate because I think they induce different kinds of outcomes on swings. Sinkers tend to go down more and two-seamers go out more. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but a sinker goes down more when you're watching the game, so I differentiate them. The next type of fastball we have is a cutter or a cut fastball. These are fast and move horizontally, but with glove side run, so it's the opposite direction from a two-seam. It's a pitch that blurs the lines between a four-seam fastball and a slider. To throw a cutter, you take the four-seam grip and shift it to the side of the baseball, and then the pitcher also adds some supination, where they turn their wrist and hand outward or upward while throwing. And then you can change the pressure on your index and middle fingers to change how it moves. Mariano Rivera was a great example of someone who threw a cutter. He's like the most famous cutter in baseball. And he would manipulate how much pressure he put on his fingers, which would change how much it would move. And you could throw different kinds of cutters to the same batter and the same at bat based on that. And it would make it very hard to hit. And basically, he threw basically one pitch. He had others to keep the batters honest, so they couldn't just sit on the cutter. But basically, because the cutter could move so differently from pitch to pitch, it didn't really even matter. So all those changes I just mentioned all reduce the speed of the pitch, anywhere from 2 to maybe even 8 miles per hour from that pitcher's four seam. But because there's so much movement and it spins more, it's a lot harder to hit than if it was just a four-seam fastball at that slower speed. Plus, the cutter's movement does come later, which makes it harder to hit. And like I said, Mariano Rivera, the famous Yankees closer, unanimous Hall of Fame pick, he has the most famous cutter of all time. And some other pitchers that throw cutters that are very famous are closers Kenley Jansen and the Guardians' current closer Emmanuel Clase, all of whom throw very good cutters or did throw very good cutters. Clase's is even faster than Mariano's. It's a really, really nasty pitch, which is nasty's good when you're talking about pitching. Nasty, filthy, dirty. Those are all good things. And lastly, for fastballs, there's the rising fastball. This is basically not real, but I thought I would include it. A rising fastball is similar to a four-seamer, but with a looser grip so that the pitcher generates more spin, creating the illusion that the pitch is actually rising upwards. So it's an illusion. No baseball pitch has ever been proven to actually rise upwards because of the different forces that act on the ball. It's impossible unless you were able to throw like 2 to 4 times harder than a human being could. But that said, it looks like it's going upwards because it drops less than the batter thinks it will. Because no matter what you do with the ball, when you release it, it's going to go down because of gravity. So it will go down less than the batter thinks, and so that gives it the illusion of rising. So that's everything on the fastballs. Now we'll move to off-speed pitches. So just as a reminder or refresher, off-speed pitches are slower than fastballs, and the point is to disrupt the batter's timing. The main off-speed pitch, or the classic, is a changeup, which looks like a fastball but is much slower, around 8 to 15 miles per hour slower. So the batter thinks a fastball is coming, but it's a lot slower, so they swing early, and then they miss the ball. So yeah, that's where the name comes from. It changes up the pace, changes up the batter's timing. And in Spanish, they call it el cambio, the change. That's a fun fact for you. And then there's different kinds of changeups. There's a classic, which comes out of the pitcher's hand looking like a fastball, but is noticeably slower, like I said, but it generally falls straight down as it nears the plate. And then there's the circle change, which is similar to the classic change. Obviously, it comes out looking like a fastball, but is slower. But the difference is in the grip. You basically have your hands on the ball where your index finger and your thumb make a circle, and then your 3 fingers are on the other side of the ball. And so, and then you throw with pronation so that the pitch breaks to the arm side, sort of like a screwball, which I'll get to. So the classic change kind of goes straight down, and the circle change goes down into the arm side. It has much more movement. It's almost like a sinker, but obviously slower. So some pitchers throw the combo of a sinker and a circle change to throw off batters. There's lots of different kinds of pitch combinations, and pitchers throw what feels good to them. But a classic combo, some guys are sinker slider, and some guys have sinker change, sinker circle change. It's a good pairing, not only with a 4-seam fastball, but if you throw a 2-seam or a sinker, because they both have downward and lateral movement, but different speeds. It's very deceptive to the hitter. Next, we have the palm ball, which is similar to a fastball grip, but the ball is held in the palm, which takes even more velocity off the pitch because you have more of your hand on the ball when you release it. Basically, I feel like, I'm not an expert, like I said, but the less you have touching the ball when you release it, the faster it can go, and the more you have touching the ball, the slower it will go, or the more it might move because of, how much force and where you're putting it on and how much you're taking it off and everything. So the palm ball, you can see here in this Chipper Jones video, it shows how slow a palm ball is and its movement. Trevor Hoffman is a very famous palm ball thrower. He was a closer for many, many years and threw a palm ball that moved quite a bit. And he talks about how he started with a changeup grip and then moved into a circle change that was better. And eventually, when he was fooling around or working on it, he realized if he puts it back even further into his hand, onto the pad of his upper palm, right under the fingers, he could take even more velo off and get even more movement. So he threw a palm ball, and it was so successful he made it into the Hall of Fame. Another player who famously threw a palm ball was Satchel Paige, a former Negro Leagues player who came over to MLB after Jackie Robinson. And then lastly, for our off-speed pitches that aren't breaking balls, is the splitter. So a splitter looks like a fastball coming out of the pitcher's hand until just before it gets to the plate when it drops straight down, which some broadcasters or baseball people, they call that falling off the table because it looks like something rolling on a table and then falling off and going straight down. And the splitter gets its name from how you grip it. You split your 2 fingers wide across the seams. And some people mistakenly call it a split finger fastball, but it's not a fastball. It's an off-speed pitch. So it's just a splitter. And these are kind of in vogue this season in 2025. We'll get to it in a bit, but the past few seasons, sweepers were very in vogue because they were new and hitters weren't used to them. But now hitters have adjusted over the past couple of years. Forward-thinking baseball clubs are teaching splitters more now because they haven't been in vogue for a while, so batters aren't as used to them. And I think a lot of Japanese players throw splitters in that league. And so this past off-season and the one before, when big-name pitchers Yoshinobu Yamamoto and Roki Sasaki both came over to the Dodgers, they both throw very good splitters. And I think the league seeing their effectiveness and how batters aren't used to them, that's sort of an edge, at least for a little bit until the league adjusts back, that teams are recognizing and teaching to players. So that does it for off-speed pitches, and now we'll go to breaking balls, and we'll start simply with the curveball. The curveball is a mainstay of breaking balls. It has mostly vertical break, so just up and down. It can also have lateral break. There's different kinds of curveballs, but if it breaks laterally, it will break to the glove side. There's nicknames for it: Uncle Charlie, the Bender, the Hook, a Yacker, and the Deuce. It's called the Deuce because the catcher, back when they used to do hand signals, they would put down the number 2 for a curveball. 1 would be a fastball, 2 a curve, and then from there, like 3 slider or splitter or changeup, depending on how good the pitcher's pitches were and what order they threw them in. One type is the 12-6 curveball. So pitchers who throw basically overhanded or completely overhanded have a curveball that breaks straight downwards, which is called 12-6 because if you look at a clock, from 12 to 6 is just straight up and down. If you have a lower arm slot, that means the curveball will tilt more in its flight path. So like 1 to 7, 2 to 8, something like that. They're not called that, but those are curves that aren't 12 to 6. So basically it's like 12 to 6 or just a regular curve is how they're called. And then a different kind of curveball is the knuckle curve, or also called a spike curve. A knuckle curve or a spike curve is a standard curveball, but thrown with one or more of your index and middle fingers bent. So people who throw this say that it gives them a better grip on the ball, but allows for tighter spin and more movement. It basically comes down to what's comfortable for the pitcher, though. You can see here in this Craig Kimbrell video, former closer for multiple teams, that the knuckle curve definitely has a tighter spin and is faster. So those are curveballs. That's just a very basic breaking ball that can move in various ways. And then next you have a slider, which is faster than a curveball and mostly horizontal break, but can have vertical too, with glove side run, just like a curveball. The main difference is that it's thrown harder and has a sharper break than a curveball, but it's also one of the harder pitches to learn how to throw. A common feature in most slider grips is that your index and middle fingers are in close proximity to each other, but it varies between pitchers. The wrist motion often contributes a large amount to the pitch's movement, and the slider and its movement are characterized by a more supine positioning when you release it. Slider won't break mostly to the side, the glove side, whereas a curveball mostly goes up and down with a little side. And these are generalizations too. Some sliders are more up and down, which is almost like a splitter, but generally most sliders go left to right or right to left. And Garrett Cole, a Yankees pitcher who's out this season, Garrett Cole actually throws a slider and a knuckle curve. So even if you, as a batter, can see that it's a curve, a breaking ball, you don't know which it is because he throws two. He also throws a cutter and a four-seamer, and has thrown a sinker in the past. So he has 3 fastballs in his repertoire as well, and he throws a changeup. So, and his four-seamers can get up to like 98, 99 sometimes. So that's why he's one of the best pitchers, because he throws a lot of pitches very well, and he can spot them. So that's the curveball and the slider. Next we have the slurve, which, as the name implies, is a combination of the slider and the curve. So it's a pitch that's thrown with a curveball grip, but thrown with the arm action of a slider with slider velocity. So it moves a little faster than a curve, and it has a little bit more slider movement, but it has a curveball grip. So the spin is a little bit different. And then the sweeper I talked about a little bit earlier. It's another slider variation, kind of like a slurve. Has a large amount of horizontal movement as opposed to a traditional slider, which has a tighter break. The sweeper tends to have a little looser break, more like a slurve or a curve. But what differentiates a sweeper from a slurve is that it's thrown with side spin, with a two-seam grip instead of a curve grip. So the pitcher's, quote, getting around the baseball. So that does it for both off-speed and breaking balls. Now we'll go to uncommon pitches. These are pitches that aren't thrown that much anymore, mostly because they're out of fashion. But sometimes later on, I'll end this section with illegal pitches. Some pitches were outlawed. So we'll start with my favorite, the knuckleball. This is a pitch you do not see that much anymore, and nor did you ever really see it that much. There's usually only one or two, maybe three guys in the league at one time that throw it. It's a pitch that's thrown to minimize the spin on the ball when it's in flight. So that causes an erratic, unpredictable motion that changes with every single knuckleball that's thrown. And because it moves in unpredictable ways, it's really hard for batters to hit, but also very difficult for pitchers to control and for catchers to catch, and for umpires to call either as a ball or a strike, because it can move a lot at the last minute, or it can move very little, or it can move a lot up front and then stop moving. It's just the perfect knuckleball is thrown with no spin. So it just moves through the air, and as the air moves around it, it influences where the knuckleball goes, and it can dance, as it's called. It can really get up there and dance or move, and it's really hard to hit. And because it doesn't have spin, it will go very slow. It's not uncommon to see knuckleballs in the 60s and 70s mile per hour, versus that pitcher's, the average speed of a pitcher's fastball, I think, is like 92 or 4 or something like that. So that's a big gap. And that does help with the deception as well, the difference in speed. But the main appeal of a knuckleball is that it is really hard to hit because you don't know where it's going. The knuckleball was originally thrown with the knuckles, hence the name, but eventually over time it's been changed into a fingertip grip. It's, fingernail grip almost, depending on the pitcher. Some famous knuckleballers are Tim Wakefield from the Boston Red Sox, or Jim Bouton, who is a former Yankee who wrote Ball 4, a very famous baseball book. And some nicknames for the knuckleball are the flutterball, the floater, the dancer, the butterfly ball, the ghost ball, and the bug. I just really like the knuckleball because it's fun to watch if a pitcher's throwing it well. If a pitcher's throwing it poorly, it will have some spin and it won't move and it will get crushed. And you'll know right away at the beginning of a knuckleballer's outing if he has it that day or not. And if he doesn't, he's going to struggle quite a bit. But if the knuckleball is really dancing that day, it's a beautiful thing to watch, at least to me, because it's so erratic and it just makes fools out of hitters. But like I said, not many people throw it anymore. I think Matt Waldron of the Padres is the only guy who throws one now, and he actually throws kind of a faster one. I think it's in the 80s, like low 80s, high 70s. And it's not his main pitch. Most knuckleballers will basically throw the knuckleball and a fastball that's not very good, and maybe one other pitch, which is unusual for starters because you usually have to have 4 pitches at least to get through a major league hitting lineup. But Matt Waldron throws, I think, 4 or 5 pitches. So he's more of a modern take on a knuckleballer. But that is the knuckleball, my favorite unusual pitch. My next favorite and a fun one to watch is the screwball. A screwball is a breaking ball that's thrown so as to break in the opposite direction of a slider or curveball with arm side run. The screwball grip is similar to that of the circle changeup, but with different placement in regards to the seams. There was a widespread belief for many years that it put more strain on a pitcher's arm than a regular breaking ball like a slider or curveball, which is why it fell out of fashion in the league for so long. Back in the day, I think Bob Feller threw one in like the 50s, and it was more common. I think Satchel Paige threw one. It was just more common way back when, and it has since fallen out of fashion because people were afraid of getting hurt. But there was a 2014 New York Times study that found that to be false, and it has the same strain as any other pitch. So more pitchers actually throw the screwball now. So you can see in this video with Devin Williams, he throws a screwball, but he calls it the airbender because it moves so much. That's a nickname for screwballs, and another nickname is the Scroogey. But yeah, so Devin Williams is the guy that comes to mind about screwballs, but it used to be more in fashion decades ago, and who knows, maybe it'll come back in fashion now too. And pitchers might pair it with a more typical breaking ball, like a curve. Since they break in opposite directions, it might be hard for hitters to pick up. Next, we have the fork ball. Like a splitter, the fork ball is held between the first two fingers and thrown hard, and you snap your wrist. But the difference is that for a fork ball, the ball is jammed deeper between the two fingers, almost kind of like a palm ball. And the result is that the fork ball generally is slower than a splitter and has more of a tumbling action, kind of like a 12-6 curveball. So I guess you could think of a fork ball as kind of a in between a splitter and a curve. And one of the nicknames of the pitch is a dry spitter because it's kind of like a spitball, which I'll get to in a minute, and is now an illegal pitch. And lastly, for unusual pitches, is the ephus. And the ephus is a very high arcing off-speed pitch with very low velocity, thrown with an overhand grip. And the purpose is to catch the hitter off guard. It's basically a trick pitch. You won't see it. You might watch a baseball team all year and not see one because it's basically not thrown because it is so slow. And that gives a batter more time to line it up and hit it well. But that said, because it isn't used very often, if a pitcher throws a fastball and then slips in an ephus, it could really throw off the batter because it's like 50 miles an hour slower. But it's mainly now because it is a trick pitch. The only way you might see one is if a position player takes the mound, they might throw an ephus. So just in general, quickly, if teams are being blown out or winning, I think the rule is by 6 or 7 or more runs. If you're winning or losing by that much, you're allowed to put position players in as pitchers, basically to save your pitching staff's arms. So oftentimes if you're losing, you'll put in your backup right fielder who used to be a pitcher in high school just to get through some innings because you're already losing. So who cares if they can't pitch? And sometimes you'll see them throw an ephus. Sometimes they have good pitches, decent pitches, but for the most part, they don't. And sometimes they'll throw an ephus, but it really was an old pitch that isn't really used anymore. But an ephus was named by outfielder Maurice Van Robeys. When he was asked what it meant, he replied, "Ephus ain't nothing, and that's a nothing pitch." And although the origin of the name is not known for certain, ephus may come from the Hebrew word ephes, which means 0. There's actually a movie called Ephus that's out in theaters now, or may already be streaming, I'm not sure, but it's about like a rec league, I think. It looks fun. I would check it out. I just haven't been able to yet. Next, we have illegal pitches. These are pitches that have been banned from baseball, the most famous of which is the spitball. A spitball is a pitch where the ball has been altered by the application of a foreign substance, such as saliva or Vaseline. Whatever you put on the ball alters the wind resistance and weight only on one side of the ball, which causes it to move atypically or weirdly. It may also cause the ball to slip out of the pitcher's fingers without the usual spin that would accompany that pitch. So in that sense, you can think of a spitball kind of like a fastball, but with knuckleball action. Nicknames for the spitball are the spitter, the mud ball, the shine ball, the super sinker, or the Vaseline ball. So, yeah, this is an outlawed pitch. I guess pitchers used to use it more before the league got around to banning it and caring more about enforcing the ban. And umpires now check pitchers' hands for foreign substances and all sorts of things. A couple years ago in 2021, there was actually a big controversy related to this substance called spider tack. Spider tack isn't quite the same thing as a spitball because spider tack is a substance that made your fingers much more sticky, so you could grip the ball better and therefore throw with much higher spin. So it's a little different, but it's similar to a spitball in that it was a foreign substance applied to the ball. The other illegal pitch I'll tell you about is an emery ball. An emery pitch or emery ball is one where the ball has been altered by scuffing it with a rough surface like an emery board or sandpaper. This technique alters the spin of the ball, causing it to move in an atypical manner, which can either go up or down depending, and it makes the pitches a lot harder to hit. So it's an unfair advantage, and that's why it was outlawed. And you can see there's a Phil Negro video where he's trying to get away with one. But this is an older, both the spitball and the emery ball are from many decades ago and have not been around for a long time. But if you're interested in the history of the game, now you know about those two illegal pitches. And then lastly, we have purpose pitches, which aren't exactly pitches, but I've included them because they're elements of pitching. Purpose pitches aren't intended to get batters out, but they instead serve another purpose, which is why they're called that. The first up is a bean ball, which is literally a ball thrown at a batter with the intention of hitting them. So you're trying to bean them in retaliation for maybe their pitcher hit one of your guys, so you're hitting one of their guys. Or maybe he said something to you in the media or before the game that day. It's very ego driven. You can see in this video that the Tribe and the Royals exchange beanballs. Sometimes it goes over several years. If something happens in the postseason, the next time the teams meet the next season, you might see some stuff, and it can lead to fights or it can follow fights. But that's basically a beanball. And then the next is a brushback pitch, which is similar, but it's a ball thrown high and inside to intimidate the batter from step back from the plate. So basically, if the batter is crowding the plate and the pitcher wants them to step back, he'll throw a brushback, which is sort of not intended to hit them, but it looks like it might, so it kind of scares them. And the purpose is not to hit the batter. That's the main difference between a beanball and a brushback pitch. Just to give a little more context, hitters crowd the plate in order to better swing at pitches on the outside because they're closer. And they'll do that if they don't think the pitcher will throw inside, because some pitchers are afraid to throw inside because they might hit the batter and then thus give away a free base. So the brushback pitch helps a pitcher to, quote unquote, reclaim the corners of the strike zone by forcing the batter to stand further away. And then nicknames for the brushback, you've got high and tight, chin music, and a close shave. Next up is a pitch out, which is a ball intentionally thrown outside of the strike zone, usually also high, with the purpose of preventing a stolen base. Or sometimes to thwart a hit and run or prevent a suicide squeeze. But the point is not to attack the hitter, it's to go after base runners. The downside is if the runner doesn't try to steal or you don't actually throw them out, it's still a ball against the batter. And then the last purpose pitch is a pickoff. And so this is an act by either a pitcher or a catcher, but mostly pitchers, throwing a live ball to a fielder at a base so that they can tag out a base runner who's either leading off or about to begin stealing the next base. So instead of throwing a pitch to the catcher at home, he will instead throw over to first, second, or third to try to tag out a runner. And since second base is the most commonly stolen base because it's the furthest away from home plate, that means pitchers usually will throw over to first as runners are trying to get to second. And since a left-handed pitcher will face first base, that gives them more of an advantage to pick off runners. So because they face first base and in their natural motion, their arm will cross by first base, so they can have a very deceptive pickoff move. Andy Pettitte had a great pickoff move. A lot of lefties have a good pickoff move because they face first when they're pitching. And then there's some nicknames for pickoffs, keeping the runner close or catching the runner napping when they're tagged out. Pickoffs serve a defensive purpose in trying to prevent base running and stolen bases. So those are all the pitches I have for you today. There are probably others that I may have missed, but those are the main ones. If I did miss any or you want to see me talk about more, comment below. But basically, that's what I've got for you. Hopefully this helps you identify different pitches. And the next time you watch a baseball game, you can go, oh yeah, I remember that. That's a curveball or that's a splitter. Yeah. Hopefully you enjoyed this and learned a thing or two. And I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.